Hello, greetings, and welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys. This is a podcast where two old friends talk about movies, television, theater, books, all kinds of stuff, but especially in the genres of horror and science fiction. Influences, references, how it affected us, and everything else. My name is David. I'm here with my great friend Tim. Hey, Tim.
Hey, how's it going out there, David?
It's going well. What about you? How are you? How you been?
Oh, I've been pretty good. Getting a little rest and relaxation. Enjoying some genre fare, as we're known to do.
Mm-hmm.
On the old boob tube. That's a reference for you, isn't it?
That's an old one there. Ooh,
well, speaking of old references, let me tell you what I have been watching. I told you a few weeks back, I've been into like a documentary kick and how there's a lot of documentaries on Amazon. I caught one the other day called Master of Dark Shadows. And it is about Dan Curtis.
Dan
Curtis.
Producer,
director, creator of Dark Shadows.
Uh-huh.
For those of you that don't know out there, Dark Shadows... had a weird kind of birth. It started as sort of a gothic soap opera that only lasted so many episodes and was about to be canceled, so they didn't really have anything to lose and decided to throw a vampire into the plot.
Mm-hmm.
as one does. And immediately it became immensely popular and went on to run, I think 6 years. Didn't it run from like 65 to 71, something like that?
I think you're right.
Yeah. And I mean, it was never the greatest show, but I mean, it tackled a lot of the universal monsters as far as like a Frankenstein, a Dracula. Well, Barnabas was their vampire, and a werewolf. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but about 20 years ago, I decided to watch every single episode. And there's like 1,200 half-hour episodes.
Yeah, because they were every day, right? I remember.
Yeah.
And the theme to Dark Shadows is so memorable.
No. You'll have to put the music in there. My voice
Oh,
won't
yeah.
do it justice.
It's really good.
Yeah, it has parts that you will remember and cherish your entire life, like I have. But when you go back and watch the whole thing, I mean, it's just like a soap opera. There are huge weeks of episodes that are just completely boring and terrible.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of it was filmed live. You'll see walls shake. You'll see flies land on people's foreheads. I mean, some of it is unintentionally hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I don't mean to dwell on that show in particular. This documentary was on Dan Curtis, who also went on to do other shows that we liked, including The Night Stalker.
My favorite, yes.
He produced that little Richard Matheson gem, Trilogy of Terror, as well as the movie Burn Offerings, which is another favorite of mine. So, and then he went on and became mega famous for The Winds of War, which was a huge miniseries in the 80s.
Well, I remember they also did a movie version of Dark Shadows that I saw at the Princess and scared me because it was very Hammer-like. It was much bloodier than the television series. You know, it's kind of like they said, hey, we can do anything. It's our movie. So Barnabas was a lot scarier. It was a lot creepier. And I really liked it.
And they lifted some of the more popular plots from the series to adapt in the movie as well.
Yeah, like with Angelique.
His discovery.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I always remember too, and this was like a jewel I always throw out to people if they go, talking about television. Like I used to throw out Spectre. And I think you and I have talked about that before. That was a made-for-television movie that Gene Roddenberry did that was actually horror, not science fiction. and it was about it was a great pilot for a series that was never picked up, but it was about psychic investigate, essentially like Sherlock Holmes, but he investigates psychic stuff. Sort of was the approach of the thing. But for Dan Curtis, I've always thrown out the Norliss tapes. I loved the Norliss tapes, which I think was another pilot that was never picked up.
Quite possibly, yeah.
But Roy Finnis was in it, and basically it was a writer who was going. It sounds like Misery. It was a writer who was going off to finish his last book, and his publisher calls, can't get a hold of him, finally goes to the remote cabin where he is. He's totally disappeared. And the only thing there are this entire stack of audio cassettes. And naturally the writer's name was Norliss, so it was called the Norliss tapes. But as he puts a cassette in, it suddenly goes to that story. And I think the movie was like 3 different stories, like an anthology, like a night gallery kind of thing. It was really cool.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but I remember you telling me about it. So it's definitely I do recall. But back to what you were saying about the movies. He did produce 2 movies. One was House of Dark Shadows, and then the second was Night of Dark Shadows. And by that time, for some reason, Jonathan Frid pulled out, and Night of Dark Shadows is nowhere near as good. It's actually quite surreal, if I remember right. Like, it's hard to follow. But then, and then later in the early 90s, he came back. It's funny, he was always trying to escape the shadow of Dark Shadows, but he always kept getting pulled back to it. And they did a brief revamp of it in the early 90s with Barbara Steele and I can't think of that. Yeah, she played, God, I can't think of their names now. The doctor that was studying Barnabas. Anyway, and Barnabas was Ben Cross, and it was great. It was really well done. It was prime time, like Dynasty, only Dark Shadows. And the only thing that they think may have killed it was the Gulf War. Because the Gulf War happened simultaneously, and all of that was like the first war we ever had televised, and there was just no competing with it. So it got released, at a very bad time. So anyway, and not to dwell on Dark Shadows, but a lot of this film talks about the popularity and the sustainability of Dark Shadows, and how there are still conventions going on now with these original actors still going around. And yeah.
Well, probably.
It's amazing. So, long live Dark Shadows. Anyone that has never seen it, I highly recommend checking out like a best of, because you're not going to want to immerse yourself in 1,200 episodes of a 60s soap opera. Trust me.
No. Well, they also did a revamp of Night Stalker. Didn't he do that too in like the 2000s or something? I think that was Dan Curtis too, and they did a reboot of the Night Stalker, but I don't think
it wouldn't surprise me.
Worked.
I mean, the last 2 major things he did were The Winds of War and Remembrance, and they were huge. And he directed, I think, every one of them. And a lot of people think he might have wore himself out with that, but he was consumed with it. And it ended up being huge. I mean, it won all kinds of Emmys. I mean, I remember my parents loving all that stuff. So, yeah.
Well, let's see. So, cool. I'll have to look up that documentary then, because I definitely like Dan Curtis and like a lot of the stuff he did. He was definitely a horror guy. I kind of delved into your world since we last spoke, and I went on a horror marathon a little bit.
All right, man, my kind.
I ended up watching Midsommar, which some people call Midsummer, but I think, according to an interview I watched, it's Midsommar, which is a really... I highly recommend it. I think you especially would really like it. It is, I think it would make a great double feature with The Witch.
It's the
it
same
basically-
director, right?
Yes, yeah, Ari Aster.
Okay.
And it basically tells the story of a young woman. She's had a horrible tragedy in her life, and the way they shoot that at the very beginning, in the prelude and everything, was just great. But anyway, and she's played by Florence Pugh, who is gorgeous and awesome, and I loved watching her. And she's just very nuanced in her performance and everything. But anyway, he said in interviews that actually he wanted to just do a movie about a breakup, a couple breaking up. So basically, this girl's had this horrible tragedy which prevents her boyfriend from breaking up with her, and her boyfriend's going away on like a 6-week trip to Sweden, to this essentially to this very small town, because he's doing a sociology study. So she decides to go with him. She decides to go with him. Well, he and his friends, his group of friends, all of them are anthropology or sociology majors. So they're thinking about doing their thesis on this. So they go away because they friended a guy at college who is from this town in Sweden. Says, "Oh, you should come to my town," So they decide to go there, and everything is all beautiful and white, and it's at that time in Sweden where there's only a half an hour of darkness every day. So this is a horror movie done totally in the daylight, which is kind of cool. And it is terrifying, Tim. You will love it. It is creepy. It is freaky, like The Witches, where, like what did you kept saying about the goat, or the billy goat or black goat or whatever?
It's Black Phillip. It's Black Phillip.
Yeah.
It's those little kids, man. Those little kids are always dancing around. Black Phillip, it's Black Phillip.
Well, and that's what this is. This has little kids who are all with wreaths in their hair and wearing white dresses, and then there's like, I don't want to give anything away because I think it will blow your mind, everything that they do. It's really awesome. It's really awesome.
The Wicker Man is one of my favorite movies.
And, this is it.
We'll go ahead and reveal that that's going to be upcoming this season in a few short episodes from now. And I don't know how long it's been since you've seen that movie, but that movie rocks. It's just a great, great classic film, in my opinion. So when I read what Midsummer or Somar, however you say it, was about, I was like, oh, they're riding the Wicker Man train is what they're doing. Which is great. Yeah,
and
it should be revisited.
Ari Aster, who wrote and directed, he says he was even, it's a tribute to, it's an homage to Wicker Man and that whole thing. So, yeah, and I'm curious I can't wait to watch that because it's been literally decades since I've seen that movie. So that'll be interesting to watch again. But so I followed up lovely Midsommar with Chapter 2 of It, which I had not seen yet.
Yeah, I've not seen it either.
Oh, really?
I haven't. It's on my list. Sometimes I'd rather wait till they're streaming than buy them, which is great because Midsommar is now streaming on Amazon.
So. Yes. So watch it and then wait for it. It is it's a hit and miss, I think. Overall, okay. I think you'll be curious for once you see it. Maybe we even do like a little thing for our Patreon guests or something and just do it because, definitely your favorite author and everything else. And I think they do the script justice. I don't necessarily think it's as good as it could have been, but it's good. It's scary. It's definitely got some creeps to it. But I think it'd be interesting for us to dissect it as an adaptation, to look at it as how faithful is this to the book? Because people remember the miniseries, and we've talked about before the miniseries and how it was a hit and miss too. But this is interesting. It's interesting how his take on the second half of the novel. So there you go. That's what I've been doing, just hanging out. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if you recall, and any listeners out there that want to go check it out, I wrote a blog last fall, I believe, that's on our website, and it was about new visionaries and horror. I did not include Muschietti, who did it, because I had not seen enough of that to really comment. But I did include Ari Aster, who you're talking about with Midsommar and The Witch. and also the guy that did Hereditary, and also definitely Mike Flanagan, who has just continued to blow me away with his contributions to the genre. So,
well, and maybe you'll have to update it with the movie we're doing today, because
quite possibly, because he is on a roll too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, definitely. Well, what are we doing today, Tim? What are we discussing? Because we're deeply in horror world.
Yeah, we are deeply in horror world, and we are going to discuss a very modern release. Actually, it is only 2 years ago that this movie came out, and coincidentally, we are recording this on January 23rd, and this movie debuted January 23rd, 2017 at the Sundance Film Festival. It is called Get Out, and it is directed by Jordan Peele, who I think started his career as a comedian, and has now moved full-fledged into directing. It is the story of a very handsome couple, Chris and Rose, who are progressing into their relationship to the point of where he must go and meet her parents. If I haven't mentioned it, they're an interracial couple. Chris is black, Rose is white, and there's a little bit of nervousness, I feel like, with them going to visit her parents for the weekend. But she tells them there's nothing to worry about, that her father would have voted for Obama a third term if he could have, and all will be well. So they get there, and there is some... there seems to be some overly accommodating of Chris with her family that you could chalk up to white guilt, or any kind of I don't know how to describe it. So he just kind of writes some of it off, but then things proceed to get worse. And then the whole weekend just basically turns into a full-fledged nightmare of nothing that you're expecting. I will just leave it at that. And we will dive into this, what I would call a modern classic. I've mentioned before, we've had 21st century films in this season that stand out to me. One is 28 Days Later, and the other was...
Well, It Follows was great, too.
The Descent. The Descent was my other one.
The Descent, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and both of those came out in the 21st century, and I would have to say Get Out is probably right up there with those two, as far as being three of the best horror movies so far this century. So...
I would have to agree with you. I really liked this movie. I think it was... for several reasons. I think it was very well written, and it was so well written that he won an Oscar for it. It was very well directed and very well acted. I really enjoyed... I came into this with massive weird assumptions, because the only thing I had ever knew about Jordan Peele was Keen and Peele, the comedy duo that, Balake, and all of the the funny shorts that they did. And evidently they had a television show as well.
They did. I never watched it. I knew who he was, but I never watched his show.
And I really knew Keen more than Peele. So I had known his partner in comedy a lot more than him. But I thought, does that mean it's going to be like, it's going to be like a comedy horror? Is that what it's going to be? Really? I don't want to watch that.
It almost sounds like it could be a spoof. Like,
yes.
One of those Scream spoofs that the Wayans brothers did. Didn't they do those? I think they did.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of sounded like when it first came out, because it's making... we know in retrospect that it's paying homage to Eddie Murphy making that comic comment back in the 80s about if he walked into a house and he heard something say "get out," he would get the fuck out.
I used to do that all the time. Because it was one of my favorite parts of that bit. Delirious was him doing that whole thing about, why don't white people ever leave? You know, black people.
Exactly.
Black people come to the house. They go, "Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Get out. Too bad we can't stay, baby. Let's go." You know, and it's like, I'm like,
yes,
it's
exactly.
so funny. And the thing, I mean, okay. Well, two prefaces before I drone on. One, Tim and I are white people. So hopefully we are not going to say anything offensive in this, and we don't intend to be offensive.
Not
but
at all.
This is, even in Jordan Peele's own words, this is a black person's nightmare come to life. That's the way he described this movie. And it literally is. And for those of us who are Caucasian, there's also a lot of that guilt stuff goes into it. As well as you're watching this, he was so clever in the way he wrote this, and the little subtle things that happen that you go, ooh, and all that self-doubt that happens in social interactions. And then the other preface is, we do give spoilers, so if you have not seen this movie, go watch it right now, come back and then listen to us talk about it.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie you don't want spoiled, for sure.
Yeah. I've got a lot of little backstory stuff that I did research on for this. Like I said, he described it as this was a black person's nightmare come to life. He was asked on NPR why you were known for comedy. Why did you do horror? And he goes, "Oh, you don't understand. I've loved horror movies since I was 14 years old, and I've always loved horror. Comedy was just a way, something else that I did, but I don't think I'll go back to comedy anymore." And he since hasn't. He's done another horror movie, the Us one.
I've not seen that.
He's gone on to produce the new Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. And he's just really good. He said, "Why do I love horror movies? Because," and where's the quote here? "Horror is how society faces its own fears." I thought that was really kind of cool. And he described this as, he said, a lot of people call it a horror movie. He personally likes to call it a social thriller. Because he says it does have horror elements, but it's very suspenseful about society and interactions. So I thought all of that was really good stuff. What do I have here? In this interview I heard with him, it was so great. He said he was definitely inspired before he wrote this by Nightmare on Elm Street, because of putting a horror story in a suburban environment. He said, he said that Freddy essentially, created the suburban horror. And he said he thought it was very interesting watching the arc of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and how Freddy almost became the star of those movies. The villain actually became the star. And people would cheer when he would say one of his puns after he gutted somebody or something. People began to relate to the monster. But he said something I really liked, and I was going to ask you about, if you've heard of this before, or if someone else has done it earlier. But he said, really, Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween were the ones that gave birth to the stalker POV, where we actually see the movie through the eyes of the killer, and we start to get into the minds of the killers.
I think I could. Well, I may be a little more educated.
You are. I know. That's why I ask.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Halloween for sure. But there are other movies before Nightmare on Elm Street that get into the POV. And the first one that comes to my head is that Alone in the Dark movie with Martin Landau in the insane asylum. Do you remember that movie? It's a great movie. The one where the power goes out and everybody gets out.
Oh, no. But that would be scary.
Yeah, and there's a killer in there known as the Bleeder. And whenever he kills people, he gets a nosebleed.
No, I haven't seen
you would remember this movie. I should send you a copy of it.
Yeah.
You have watched it with me, because Martin Landau sits up in his bed and he goes, "I made the lights go out," like he's the one that did it. and they're it's like I don't. It's really lame as far as their security measures, but the windows are controlled, I guess, electrically. So when the electricity's out, they can all escape, and they're all like killers or whatever. Anyway, that one. I mean, there's other ones too. There's movies like Maniac and some of those other 70s slashers where, I mean, so there's more. I mean, you know what? He's right in pointing out Halloween and Nightmare because they're probably bigger budget success stories than the ones I'm thinking of. So that's probably why he pointed them out.
Well, so I was trying to think, do any of the Hammers or do any of the, the Christopher Lee Draculas or Last House on the Left, Texas Chainsaw, do any of those have POV of the killer?
I don't think so, but Dario Argento was definitely doing it with movies like Deep Red.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good one.
So,
well, yeah, Suspiria is almost all from somebody. You feel like you're a voyeur that whole movie. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, okay. I hadn't thought.
And that's the mid '70s. That's before Halloween.
Okay.
Some of those are. Mm-hmm.
So
anyway, I didn't mean to digress.
No, that's great. He mentioned that, but then he doesn't do that in this movie. As a matter of fact, you're not really sure where the scary is coming from in this movie, because it's just this foreboding dread of something is not right, and it's going wrong really fast, and I need to literally get out, kind of thing.
But what's so great about it is you start suspecting, bad things, but you just don't realize how bad it is.
No.
And when you do, it's like, whoa. Yeah, it's major.
Watching it a second time, it's really creepy. This movie is really creepy. From the opening shot with the black guy walking on the street and the guy essentially abducts him kind of thing, all the way through. What was your take on it overall? I've kind of droned on, and I really like it, obviously. But what do you think?
Well, it's funny. I want to do a little background, but before I get there, I will say that Peele is incredibly knowledgeable in what he is doing. It's almost as if every single frame of this movie is there for a reason. And a lot of it does have to do with the fact that he's such a fan of movies past, but it also has to do with the intricacies of the screenplay as well.
Definitely.
One of the things that pops into my head immediately is when he uses that whole commercial, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." Like, that's just genius. And it's something we grew up with watching on television,
Yep.
Stupid commercial. A little bit more on background. This movie was made in 23 days.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of other movies I've mentioned this season that were made in a short amount of time. House of Wax was another one.
Yep.
And it's amazing the popularity of these films when they're done that fast. Halloween was made really fast, too.
Oh, yeah.
For very little money. They were supposed to film in Los Angeles. It got switched to Alabama last minute because of tax reasons. And Peele said it was like a gift. It was just an unexpected surprise how that added to the plot. As far as the setting being in the old house. I've read that Peele, since he is a comedian, he often imitated people while directing folks. He would imitate Barack Obama and Tracy Morgan and Forrest Whitaker. Can you imagine? Barack Obama directing a horror movie. That's pretty funny. And lastly, this movie made $34 million in its first weekend. It was only budgeted $4.5 million, and it went on to make 2017 the first year that horror movies reached $1 billion in ticket sales.
Wow.
And it's in combination with what you mentioned earlier, the movie It, Get Out, Split, something called Annabelle Creation, Jigsaw, It Comes at Night, and Happy Death Day. Some of those I have seen, some of those I will probably never see. But I thought that was an interesting thing, that this movie propelled the genre into billion-dollar status. That's a feat.
Well, that is a feat.
Yeah. So that's what I have for background. If you want to do any more thoughts, we can, or we can move on to casting. There's not a lot on casting that I have.
No, we can do casting, and then just kind of go through notes of how it hit me, different stuff that I liked about it and didn't, or didn't, and the same thing. with you.
Okay. As far as casting, I normally have a huge list of other contenders for certain parts, but since this was his first movie and he wrote it, I think he already had people in mind or auditioned unknowns. The only thing I find slightly strange is that somewhere Eddie Murphy was originally considered for the Chris role.
No.
So, I know. I think that, I know that, didn't Peele in his, in what you read, did you see where he had written, like, many versions of this screenplay?
Yes. Yeah.
It makes me wonder if maybe he was considering Murphy, 20 years ago when he first started it. Or something.
Now, that's possible. Maybe.
But he's too old now, quite obviously. And that's the only thing I really have as far as other considerations. Now, we can talk about who we like.
Well, no, I think the casting was really smart. I think...
Yeah.
I immediately, as soon as I first saw it, went, "Oh wow!" because that's Daniel Kaluuya, and he's the lead in my favorite Black Mirror. That's a little key for me. The second episode of Black Mirror is called 15 Million Merits, I think, and he's the lead in it, and he's great, and it's so much emotion in his face. He's easy. He's able to play so many different things, and I think they cast the perfect girl. Because she is, at the beginning, she's cute, she's friendly, she's that girlfriend, she's that girl next door kind of feel to her, but she's also so into him and wanting to defend him and help him. And then near the end, you go, what the hell just happened? It's so great. And then the rest of the cast, of course.
Yeah, Bradley Whitford is perfect. And Peele, I keep wanting to call him Keegan. Peele clearly wanted the baggage or the added emphasis or whatever of his past on The West Wing. He wanted you to like him. He wanted you to think he was ultra liberal.
Sweet and yeah. He's gentle and sweet, would never hurt anybody, and the way he does those scenes, like the scene at the fireplace at the end about, what is your purpose, Chris? And you're just going, oh, no, something's bad's going to happen. I thought even the supporting characters, I love the groundskeeper and the maid, those two actresses, an actor, I thought they did a really good job too.
Walter and Georgina.
Yeah.
And I really like Stephen Root, who plays Jim Hudson, the blind art dealer.
He's a far cry from The Office, isn't he? My stapler. It's like, nope, not anymore.
There's something about him. I can't put my finger on it. He's always reminded me of someone else, and I'm thinking it might be Rip Torn. There's a vibe about him that reminds me of another actor. Yeah. So, and then of course, Catherine Keener plays Missy, the
mom.
The mom. Right? Yep. She's such a sweet lady that hypnotizes people with her teaspoon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and you can't talk about this movie without talking about Rod either. The guy, his best friend, the TSA, or as he says, TS motherfucking A.
Really. And the only comic element really in the movie, other than some wordplay and stuff that happens at the house. I mean, he's the only comic character, I guess you would say, in the movie, for sure.
And I wonder how much of his dialogue was improvised rather than written, because there's so much of his scenes that are just like somebody going on and droning on and everything, and you can tell just Peele just said, "Okay, keep going, keep look at it." No,
right. And and what's weird is Peele says that it's ironic that they won for screenplay, because he said most of the movie is improvised. Which really kind of shocked me. Yeah, I know, because it's such a good movie. I'm like, really? Because some of that stuff Bradley Whitford says is not improvised. I don't think.
No, I don't think it is either. And I also think it deserved it because of the layering of the script. I mean, on one, that's what I wanted to get into. I mean, on one layer, you've got the typical, everybody can relate to, been dating for a few months, and now I've got to go meet the significant other's parents for the first time. And that's always going to be nerve-wracking, and you don't know if you're worthy, and you don't know, it's going to be awkward and uncomfortable and all of that. So that's one just small, the first sliver layer. You add on to that the fact that this is an interracial couple. And, it's like his first line in the movie is, "Do they know I'm black?" Kind of thing, I think, almost. And so you see that, and you kind of start to empathize with Chris and empathize with that kind of pseudo guilt trip. And then he layers on the whole thing of, and he actually hints at that in the first scene with the guy being abducted, or the guy talking to himself while he's trying to find the address. And, you're given all those societal images we get of a black man you've never recognized walking on a street that he's unfamiliar with. Why is he here? What's happening? All that paranoia that happens, and repressed, cloaked racism or whatever. You get into all of the. I think I remember Peele actually saying it in that interview I listened to, but he said, you get into, this movie touches on a lot of the situations where black people are trying to defend the fact that they don't see exactly what they're seeing. They're told that what's happening around them isn't what's happening around them, but they know it is. And I think Chris, the actor, represents that so well in so many scenes. I love it in the scene where she comes in to apologize to him in the bedroom, and he holds and holds, and she finally goes, "What?" He goes, "No, nothing." She goes, "No, tell me." He goes, "No, everything's fine." She goes, "Tell me." He goes, and he just takes that pause and goes, I told you so. And you just, the way he does that whole scene of, "I told you this would not be good." There would be some racial issue come up. And then, just overt racism at the party. I mean, it is overtly racist in so many levels, from how strong are you to genetic makeup to I voted for Obama. I would have voted for Obama a third time. All of that. It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's so many layers to this film. It's hard for me to describe them on a certain level. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, you've got the racism, but then there's also the envy at the same time, which is something they covet and are obviously trying to take from these black characters, whether it be virility or strength or eyes for photography. You know what I'm saying? The talents of a person. So really, if you took racism out of the equation altogether, it is about coveting something you don't have from another person and what you're willing to do to take it.
But it's that white man superiority too, or that character superiority, because I mean, even Bradley Whitford's dad character says something about, we're gods who are supposed to live forever or whatever. We'll never die, kind of thing. But
Yeah, you're reminding me of like the video and the history and stuff. I had completely forgotten about that. Because there's more to it. It's like an ancient clan, that comes that they're part of. Yeah.
Well, and I'll go to it. It's a key for me is Rosemary's Baby. There's a lot of this. It feels like Rosemary's Baby. Mm-hmm. The innocent character at the center sees things that everybody else doesn't. The mate or the husband, in this case, the girlfriend keeps saying, "No, that's not right. They're fine. It's not it." And he's going, "No, it is. I'm seeing it. I'm just telling you." But I wrote down in my notes, this isn't just racist, like racists who think that minority needs to be eliminated. They need to be put behind a wall, or they need to be just obliterated from the earth, or they don't have a right to be here, kind of thing. This is wanting to put these people in essentially slavery again.
Yeah, it's just another form of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like mental slavery or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And that threw me. I'll just go there real quick, but that totally threw me. That ending, the whole last act, when you realize what's really going on, I was going, what? It just really threw me for a loop the first time I saw this. I was going, they're what? They're swapping brain? What? Yeah. And not to the point of I'm stealing your brain, I'm just going to be your body like a body snatcher. It's no, you're still going to be inside there. You just can't do anything about it. I'll be driving, kind of thing. So very horror trope of losing yourself and losing your identity or being taken over or parasitical or whatever. That was in there. I've got in my notes the big horror trope of isolation. I mean, from the very beginning, Chris, obviously you get the hint that he feels isolated because it is a interracial relationship. And he feels very lucky, of course, and she's gorgeous and nice and friendly and the perfect girlfriend kind of thing. Watch out for that anyway. But they're in the car. And like that scene near the beginning, he doesn't drive. He says he doesn't drive. He doesn't have a driver's license. And she's driving, and they're going to her parents' house, and they're way out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm going, okay, he's trapped already. He has no way out right now. And I thought that isolation feeling all the way through. He feels isolated during the dinner. He feels different. He feels isolated at the party and different. And like people are looking at him and literally pointing at him and talking. And so there's a lot of that. I guess that goes along with what Peele said about social horror or whatever.
Uh-huh.
The uncomfortableness is there from the very beginning. Well, not from the very beginning. I think from the time they're on the road and the deer hits, which is, by the way, one of the best jump scares in a long time. Even the second time I jumped out of my chair, literally, when that happened. You don't expect it at all.
It's also another part of the layering. I mean, you've got the deer being hit, his mother. You've got Georgina being hit at the end by the car. I mean, there's like 3 incidences of that alone.
Yeah, and then I thought too. This time I thought, and I hadn't thought this the first time I saw it, but he leaves Mean Girl. He leaves Allison Rose. Mm-hmm. He leaves Rose in the street to die, the same way his mother died. I thought,
right, but he couldn't leave Georgina. And it ended up biting him in the ass.
Yeah, because it's not Georgina, it's Grandma.
It's Grandma. Oh, yeah. Do you think we should get a little bit into exactly what it is they intend to do? Which would deal with one of my favorite scenes. If you want to talk about scenes that stand out, it's the whole sunken place scene, where he's hypnotized by Rose's mother, Missy. Mm-hmm. She uses, for those of you that have not seen the film, and God forbid you haven't, and you're listening to us, Chris smokes. So it's alluded to earlier on in the movie that Missy can help him with this through hypnosis. She's been a successful hypnotist, I guess. So later on, when she offers again after he declines the first time, I guess he relents. I don't know. Somehow he ends up watching her, and she's like stirring her tea. And when she taps her teacup 3 times, that's the trigger. That, it's just like when hypnotists in the old days snap their fingers. She taps her cup, he goes under, and all of a sudden he's in this like overstuffed chair, and he's just sinking, and all of a sudden he's floating in like outer space in nowhere. And he can see abyss. Her. Yeah, he's like in an abyss. He can see her way up above. And I guess another metaphor for slavery is all of a sudden he is helpless and trapped by her.
Yeah. And she's looking down in on him like on a television screen or in a box. She's looking at him. And later on when it happens during the exit fight, same thing. All of them. And he even hears them talking. But he can't speak. He can't do anything. He's totally helpless. That, again, another layer of horror. Being hypnotized is scary to people. Because it's even like Rodney says, no, man, they can make you do some shit you don't want to do. Shit, man, they're going to make you a sex slave.
Exactly. Yeah, the sex slave thing comes up multiple times.
Multiple times. Even poor Rodney going to the police and saying that all they do is laugh at him and make fun of him.
And in retrospect, we were talking about coveting things, and I said virility is another one. Some of those folks covet the African American body, and maybe its legendary status.
Mm-hmm. Well, basically, by the last act of this film, what Peele has written and what the movie is saying is that this is a cult or a group or a clique or a party or whatever. They are, they're Masons. No, but they are a group. A
cult's probably a good word for it.
That has developed a process called, and I even wrote it down, coagula, which is basically taking a brain and transferring it from one body to another so that the host body still, the brain stem and all the neural functions are still there, but the new implanted brain is controlling it. And it's obviously happened before. They've done it to Rose's parents, Rose's grandparents, who have now become the gardener and the maid. And they've done it to the guy that we saw kidnapped from the very beginning scene. And he's now become what's fairly well presented as a stud.
Right.
She says, we never go out of that. We don't go out of the house. We don't leave the house much anymore. Giggle, giggle, and all of that. So, yeah. And why they have chosen African Americans or black people is kind of only hinted at, but it's told in like that montage. And that one guy at the party looks at Chris and goes, black is really in now. It's cool to be black. And then the women talking about their muscles, the guys talking about them, how fast they can run and their virility, like you said. So I think there's but it is a form of, literally they're turning these people into psychic slaves or mental slaves. And it's never shown as brilliant. And we don't know this, again, of course, as a viewer. We don't know this till the end. But if you go back and watch it a second time, suddenly you're seeing all of this, which is what I did this last time. So like that one scene where Georgina comes in to apologize to him for unplugging his cell phone. And he's trying to be nice and demure and say, no, it's okay, I understand. And she's going, no. And she's not talking right. None of the, other than Chris and his friend, none of the African Americans in the movie talk like what we would consider an African American, or don't seem like it. It's obviously a different structure to their language, to their syntax and everything. But he says at one point, looking at her, he says, well, sometimes I get uncomfortable when there's a lot of white people around. and it holds on her face for like a good, probably 45 seconds, a minute. And you see every emotion in her change. All of these micro expressions happen, and you just see it's literally like someone is fighting behind her face to get out. And she almost cries, and then she does the no, and says no like way too many times. but it's a great performance by her, and it just makes you as a viewer go. First time you're going, this is really weird. And he even says it, I think. She leaves and he says something like, that woman's messed up or whatever. But the second time you watch it, you go, oh my gosh, that's really the girl inside trying to get out for a second.
Right. Get out.
I said the title. Oh,
but you've also got, and you would realize this more on a second viewing, I would think. It's the fact that Bradley Whitford's character, what's his name, Dean, mentions that his father was beaten by Jesse Owens in the Olympics.
Yes.
And Jesse Owens was a famous black athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But now Dean's grandfather to Rose, is in the body of Walter. So that weird scene where Chris is outside smoking and he just comes flying at him, just running really fast. It's so peculiar. And then in retrospect, it all makes sense. He's still out there practicing, trying to win.
Yeah. And from a directorial standpoint, that was a great moment too. That's a good scare. It's a very Hitchcockian kind of feel. Like North by Northwest with this guy running right towards you and then just taking a 90 degree at the last angle at the last minute. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, there's plenty of things I'm sure you'll catch upon a second viewing of it.
And going back to Screenplay, like you said, I don't think I can. I think maybe Peele was being modest or whatever because so much of this movie is so well written with such layered subtext. So I don't think a lot of it was improvised. You know, like when Whitford as the dad is, so uncomfortable. Not only is it uncomfortable meeting your new in-law dad or whatever, but when he's trying to be like uber hip, it doesn't matter what color you are. If the in-law is trying to be uber hip, it just never works. And he as soon as he sees him, he goes, my man. And gives him a big hug, and you're like,
I know,
oh, no.
It's just cringeworthy.
It's going to be cringe. But he goes off on deer. About as far as I'm concerned, you could kill all of them. They're just like rats. They breed everywhere. You know what I say when I see a dead deer? I say that's a good start. And I was going, okay, all of that dialogue I've heard before in racist movies.
Right, like exactly.
In American History X and everything, I mean, they're talking about, the white supremacist crap, and it's just, I cringe just listening to it, and so to your point, I think that was intentionally written that way. That wasn't something that Bradley Whitford just improvised on set,
Right, and regardless of whether or not it was lifted from actual racism conversation or speech, it's just the metaphor itself that you have such a blatant disregard for another life of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that right there speaks volumes about someone's character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like a little glimpse or foreshadowing.
A slight key to me, but it did come up, was Texas Chainsaw. This family is up. I'm just telling you, they are. All of them are crazy.
Yeah.
And
especially Jeremy.
Reminded me of that. Oh, Jeremy's the brother, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is fucked up.
Yeah. Again, good casting, but boy, that boy is weird. He is weird. He should never ever be in a movie with what's the guy that's in Back to the Future as the dad?
Chris,
what I'm talking about.
What's his name? Oh no, you're talking about the dad, Crispin Glover. Yeah.
Yeah, these two guys should never. They're like separated at birth.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Christopher Lloyd, and then I realized, oh no, he's talking about Crispin Glover.
Yeah, Crispin Glover and
Didn't
Caleb
he kick
Landry
David
Jones.
Letterman once? I think he kicked
Yeah.
David Letterman on his television show. Yeah.
But yeah, from the minute his brother is there talking at the dinner table, just crazy. Just he's not right. Yeah.
So we realize something is not right come time we see the auction, which is kind of like a slave auction metaphor. Chris and Rose are sitting somewhere deciding whether or not they're going to leave. So he's not around. They have a big picture of him up and people are bidding on him. But what we don't know yet, really, is what they're going to do. And it turns out and this is a huge key, to be pretty much Frankenstein. They're going to take his brain and put another person's brain into his body. And you're like, whoa. I mean, I had no idea. And I had always heard there were big surprises and crazy, fantastic reasons for seeing this movie, but I had no idea it was going there. And I was like,
oh, me either.
Holy shit.
Total freak out. When they suddenly, I call it Kubrick land. When he suddenly wakes up and he's in downstairs in supposedly the place that they blocked off because I think Whitford's character says it has black mold.
Yes.
But
Black mold.
Everything is so framed. The lights on the side, the center of the television, and where his chair is. It's all very Kubrick kind of feel to me. But yeah, once that happens, you go, "What? They're doing what?"
And he sees the claw marks in the chair he's fastened to. This is after they have captured him. You know what? We really haven't. We kind of jumped over a scene where he decides that he's going to leave, and
because there's layer, like we were talking about layers of the script. I mean, the first layer is, I'm nervous to meet the parents. The second layer is, I hope the parents aren't racist. Third scene is dinner. Oh my God, the parents are racist. The next one is, oh my God, the servants are weird, and they keep getting weirder every scene I see.
Something's fucked up with any black folks that are here.
The next one is, what the hell did his mom do to me? Did her mom do to me with the hypnosis thing and the sunken place is what they called it. The sunken, that was. Then the next one is the beginning of the party when everybody shows up dressed up and in black roses, and you're like, seems like a weird kind of dinner party to me. Later on to that, I meet the new black guy, and he's even weirder than the two black people I've already met. And then they do that weird silent auction thing, and you're suddenly realizing, oh, wait, everybody's involved with this. His only hope is him and that girl need to get out of here now because this whole place is messed up. And then, like you said, the last scene, they decide to leave. And where are those keys, Rose? Rose, did you find the keys?
Right.
Keys,
She keeps delaying and saying she can't find the keys when we know that's not true. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she just pulls them up and holds them and goes, I can't give these keys to you, right, babe? And his whole face, she was his lifeline. I mean, he can't drive even. She was his only way out. And she's in on it too. He doesn't have a hope. And then we go to the basement.
And that's where he is, tied to the chair that has claw marks from previous occupants in it. And he's introduced to a video that is a little bit of a I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for. It's a little bit of a cheat, I guess you would say, to give us some history of what's going on. I don't know why they would show him before they do it, but it's good for us.
Well, I had that question too, and watching it a second time, it suddenly kind of made a little bit more sense because of that videotape. Because videotape, listen to me, I'm old. But the television was old too, and it looked like an old videotape. It's just me.
It did.
Observation.
It had tracking marks on it, didn't it? I want to say it had like weird tracking, like old videotapes used to do. Yeah.
After I saw it the first time, I thought, okay, why are they even doing this? I understand the show him off and bid, but then as soon as the bidding's over that night, why don't they just kill him? I mean, why do the terror train stuff that they've been doing to him? Why does she lead him on so much and everything else rather than just set him up and, why don't they just hypnotize him and freeze him and have him stand there so people can bid on him or whatever? But then when you watch the videotape, he says it's 3 phases, and one of them was mental preparation, which maybe is making him scared or paranoid or whatever.
Submissive.
So maybe, yeah. Or scared enough so that it's easier for them to do the neurological pairing or whatever. I don't know, but he says it's 3 phases basically. Oh, and it turns out that the guy that bid and won on him is the blind guy.
Right.
Well,
and he's an art collector, something to do with art, and Chris is a photographer, and he's also blind, so he's jealous of Chris's eyesight in being able to create art. Mm-hmm. So, which is another metaphor for critics. You know what I'm saying? People that don't know how to do it, or that can't do it, or fail at doing it, usually move on to criticism. So. Right. There's a lot of shit going on in this film.
As a horror genreist, did you think the attack and the blood and everything that comes in the last act, did that come as a shock to you, based on the rest of the movie?
No, not really. Okay. But then again, that's the kind of thing I expect when I go to a horror movie, in most cases. I mean, They even had a little bit of it in subtle movies like The Witch.
Yeah, but I was like, I kind of, even the second time after I watched it, I thought, I actually liked that. Because it felt like you were Chris and he was your surrogate. And, that vengeance was pretty sweet, putting the antlers through Dad and literally curb stomping the brother's skull in. It was like, yes, that's what they deserve. Get out.
No, I see where you're coming. Yeah. It's justified. It's like, it's one of those moments where you get up and go, fuck yeah, this is awesome. Kill him.
Kill him. Kill her too. Kill everybody in your way.
Yeah, get out.
And, body count wise, that ranks right up there. I mean, he essentially killed
7. Is what I have.
The art critic, the dad, the brother, the mother, the sister or his girlfriend, grandma and grandpa. Yeah, 7.
Georgine, yeah. We keep talking about the layers and the metaphors and stuff, and now I keep hearing us say, get out, because it's funny. It belongs, it's the title of the movie. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's also the ties we have to the Eddie Murphy routine. Everything.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he counterpoints in writing and directing this. Chris is literally at his most vulnerable. He is tied up. He's already been hypnotized, and they can just clink a coffee cup and he goes. Back to Rod trying to figure the puzzle out and taking everything to the police and saying they're sex slaves. See, that's what they are. I think they're abducting brothers and they turn them into sex slaves.
And that's the only scene to me that is almost like a little out of place, but it's comedic relief. When all the cops are there laughing at him.
Oh, yeah. The one that got me that I really did laugh at was the one that when earlier on when he's actually talking to Chris and Chris has sent him the picture of the guy and he's saying, he's from Brooklyn. Why would he dress that way? That ain't him. And he goes, no, that's him. I'm serious. Everything else. He goes, well, it's because I'm telling you, I think what's happening is sex slaves. And he goes off with that big thing about Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, they just come over there and they just, they think they're going to have some sex and stuff like that. But no, he's drilling into the brains. And he goes off. He goes, now you got a decapitated head.
And he doesn't realize how true what he's saying is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like foreshadowing. Yeah. I mean, they've removed the brain, but it's not too far from drilling into the brain.
Right. It was.
I like the scene where Rod calls Rose.
Where Rod
Where Rod calls Rose. I guess he's calling Chris's cell phone. I can't remember whose phone it is.
Yes, he keeps calling Chris's for 2 days, and he doesn't answer. And finally, Rose answers Chris's phone.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like trying to keep her on the phone. There's something that happens, and all of a sudden he realizes, oh shit, she's.
Well, it's great because he is so, you see, and again, great performances. You see in his face, oh my God, I finally got somebody. Where's Chris? I'm really worried about him. Da 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 da. And then it cuts to her, and she's just sitting upright at the dining table and she's so cold, and her eyes are so black, and she's so vicious, but she's sounding, I'm really worried about Chris. So sensitive, but so insincere. And at one point he goes, wait, Rose, can you hold on a second? He puts her on mute, and as soon as he puts her on, bitch is lying. She is fucking lying to me.
But then at one point she says, I know you like me, Rod. And I think
he tries to record her.
Turn.
Yeah. It was she is lying to me? Man. Mm-hmm. And because even when he hangs up on her, because he gets so mad because she keeps saying, no, you want me. I know you do. And da da da. When we were at parties, you always looked at me and he goes, no, I care about Chris, man. But he finally hangs up and goes, that bitch is mean. She is mean. Mm-hmm. Great. And then the way he, again, we're talking layers, but the way he layered that whole exit from hit the brother to now I got to kill Dad. Now I'm getting out of here.
It starts with the stuffing from the chair. He somehow gets the stuffing from the chair in his ears so that he can't hear the clink of the spoon on the teacup. I'm not sure how that happened. Yeah, it is. But if his hands are secured, I mean, he must have gotten one of his hands loose. Is all I can figure. And,
they show him in that one shot when he finally pulls a little bit of it out. He leans all the way down. So he could get it in his ear. He leans all the way down and can, it's almost touching his hands.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
So he watches the video. He gets hypnotized. He escapes. Is that when he kills the brother for the first time? Because the brother's not dead.
He beats the brother with the bocce ball.
Right. And then he stabs Dad with antlers while... Stephen Root, what's his name? Jim Hudson is on the operating table with his head cut open.
Yep.
Waiting for his new brain. Or to get his brain.
And Dad turns over a lamp as he's dying, which sets the room on fire.
Right.
So now the house is burning.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Then Missy tries to stop him when he gets upstairs.
The mom. Oh, yeah, and he just flings that teacup. I mean, just... You're like, oh, no, you're not touching that teacup.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I can't remember how he gets rid of her.
She stabs him in the hand with the letter opener, and he turns around and stabs it into her throat.
Okay.
As they fight. Yeah.
And meanwhile, Rose is upstairs with her Sony Walkman or headphones or whatever on, jamming to some music. She doesn't hear any of this.
Yeah, and she's listening to Dirty Dancing. She's listening to I've Had the Time of My Life. And you notice behind her are all the pictures left. We kind of skipped that scene where Chris saw the pictures, but
I love
all of the pictures of her boyfriends.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of that music is hilarious. And, well, you know this but it's not been published yet, but I do that in my book. There's a big point in the climax where there's this huge, battle of zombies going on, and Huey Lewis is playing. It's like, I Want a New Drug, or one of those. It's a Huey Lewis greatest hits cassette, but yeah. Yeah, I love juxtaposition of the absurd with, violence. I think it's hilarious.
Well, and comedy with horror, and he does it so well
Right.
in this. It's not one way or the other, and it doesn't cheapen the other one. He just does it really well, I think.
And as he's going, he gets in the car, right, and hits Georgina.
No, before that, he goes to the front door, and then suddenly we get,
Jeremy.
Oh, I'm not dead jump scare.
Yeah, Jeremy's back. Yeah, you can tell it's got like every horror movie trope. It's all of a sudden Peele's like, wait a minute, I got to get all this shit in there. Whammo.
Well, and he's trying to do the old what he was talking about at dinner, the MMA chokehold on him kind of thing, and it's like, no, that's not going to work. So and he finally gets the best of him, knocks him down, and literally does do like the American History X thing, the curb stomping. I'm really going to crush your skull, which again I think was a very deliberate choice on Peele's part to do that. He gets in the car, is driving away, and hits Grandma.
Well, we don't know at the time, but it's Georgina.
Well, hits Georgina, and
who is their African American housekeeper.
Has a chance to get away. Right there, he's got a chance to get away, but he doesn't because of the guilt. Because his mom died at a hit and run, and he's always blamed himself for not getting to her sooner, so to speak. He's always thought that had he told people earlier that she was missing or wasn't home yet from work, that maybe they could have saved her. So he's always blamed himself. So he gets up, saves Georgina. Again, great layering on that whole subtext there. It's great too. But as they're driving away, girlfriend, who now has heard him hit Grandma, comes out of the house with a gun and says,
a big shotgun.
Grandma. And says, Grandma.
Yeah.
And Grandma fights him, and they end up, and you also see a huge scar across her forehead.
Yeah, her wig comes off. And you see where she's had a brain transplant. Yeah.
And she makes him, she essentially causes him to wreck into a tree, which kills her, but, just knocks him out. He
in time for Rose to catch up. Yeah.
And she's shooting at him, but she also brought Grandpa with her. And does the whole get him, Grandpa. Grandpa tackles him, but then Chris flashes Grandpa with the cell phone.
The cell phone flashlight or something, or a camera flash. Yeah.
Yeah, because...
And we learned earlier that camera flashes let them lapse back into themselves briefly. It happened at a party earlier.
Right, because it happened at the party with the abducted guy.
From the beginning of the film. Yeah. The sex slave.
The sex slave. Yeah, literally the sex slave. It's like a Jeffrey Dahmer shit, man. They cut your head off, and then they're still fucking you. But anyway, but so Grandpa says, let me do it to Rose, and takes the gun from her, but instead of shooting Chris, he shoots Rose in the stomach. And then Chris thinks he's going to shoot him, but instead he turns it around and shoots himself. Blows his head off. And so Chris is there with a bunch of dead people. And then, and they could, I was thinking about directorial scenes. He could have left it there, or even then done the whole cop car pulls up that he does at the end. But he does that last little sequence scene with Rose where she's still alive. And she says, I love you. I really do. I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And he starts to choke her. And then she starts smiling while he's choking her.
Yeah,
it's like she likes
up,
it.
Man. Yeah,
and
she's insane.
And it is so creepy.
And you're like, how much she had played him. She's still trying to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it makes you so mad. She is just, that's another thing, too, that's a layer on this that I got this second time. I didn't get the first, which is this female power throughout this. With the exception of Georgina, most of the men at the party are led around by their wives, and their wives are really controlling the conversations. Misty is the one who hypnotizes him and is also the one that tells everybody what to do. Like, even nicely earlier says, no, honey, why don't you go get this for them or whatever. But then she's telling the son, no, go do this because you've done enough already. And telling Rose what to do. And then Rose's power over Chris. That whole female empower, it gets creepy when it's... but anyway, then the cop car pulls up and we go immediately back to the scene with the policeman at the beginning. And we think, oh my God, he's gonna get killed. They're going to blame him for this. Why? Because of the color of his skin. Has nothing to do with what happened.
Totally expecting Night of the Living Dead. I was like, they're just going to shoot him, or they're going to arrest him. I said, this is going to be the most downbeat fucking ending. And then I thought, you know what? He's a studier of horror movies. I wouldn't be surprised if he did it.
Well, he said that. He said one version of this movie, he did have Chris die. And because one of his inspirations for this movie was Night of the Living Dead. Because it had a leading guy who was a black guy.
Dwayne Jones.
Was a strong character. Yeah.
Correct.
But instead it turns out to be Rodney.
I know. I was like, what the hell?
And I love the way they do that because he just gets out and goes, holy shit. And Chris gets up, gets in, sits in the car, and then they take this long pause, one shot of just showing them both sitting in the car. And Rodney's like looking at Chris and then looking back at the street and you think, oh, there's going to be a jump scare, or the real police are going to show up, or something's going to happen. And it goes on like way longer than you really think it should. And all of a sudden he says something like, man, I told you not to go in that house. I just told you. And Chris just kind of looks at him and he goes, okay, fine. And they just drive off. And I was going, that is great. That is, it was that breath that some directors don't take. Even Sam Raimi. As soon as you're at the end and you're gone. But this took a little pause there.
Or there's another punch.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Like a final scare. Yeah.
Yeah. There is no final girl in this. I guess Chris is the final girl, if we want to talk horror tropes, right?
He is, yeah.
And like I said, I did have the last note. I did love the fact that he left her to die just like his mother died. Just alone in the street kind of thing. And that's like, yeah, you're right. She deserved that.
I've got a few notes and awards before we move on to keys. This movie won a lot of awards. But the group that we were referring to earlier, I had written it down, is the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, the Knights Templar were
with the white
supposedly
supremacists.
Well, no. I don't think they were white supremacists. No.
Oh, then that's not the name of their group. I thought that... Did they have a name for this group in the film?
No. They just... Okay. He just says... As a matter of fact, I think he says our group at one point, the grandfather in the video. But that's it.
So why do I have Knights Templar written down? I know I shouldn't be asking you. I should be asking myself.
Well, the Knights Templar were responsible for protecting the Holy Grail. They were wiped out by the Pope.
That's right. And they allude to this group being that old with that helmet that Jeremy wears when he abducts the guy at the beginning of the movie and later is in the car when Chris is driving away.
Oh, he is wearing a Knight's
He's
helmet.
wearing a Knight's helmet.
Yeah.
That's why I have it written down. It's like they're part of some cult or whatever you want to call it that comes from generations and generations before them.
Yeah, I think they're more like, to me, they were always like the Masons.
Right.
The super secret society, the Skull and Bones Club, that kind of stuff. That I could see all of those allusions.
Okay.
To an elitist, white supremacist cult.
Exactly.
I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I had it down. Because I like that. That's just another layer to me. I love when you get a history as well of these kind of things.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a taste of it. Well, as you know, this film was nominated for Best Picture. It was one, two, three, four, the sixth horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture, if you include Jaws, The Exorcist, Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, and Black Swan. This was number 7. It was the best rated film on Rotten Tomatoes for the entire year of 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge award right there. Not really an award, but a feat. It did win Screenplay, as you mentioned, at the Oscars, although Peele says it was much improvised. I find this hilarious. The Golden Globes said it would only be eligible for comedy or musical, and Peele immediately said it's a documentary. So he's still funny, man. He's still funny.
That's great.
And profound.
That is great. Mm-hmm.
It was nominated for Picture, Director, Screenplay, Actor, highest grossing horror debut ever at $176 million, dethroning Blair Witch Project, which was $140 million. And guess what list it's on?
Oh, is it on the 100?
It's on the 1001 movies to watch before you die, like most of our selections. So
we are doing all of those. We're just going to do them all.
Yeah, pretty much. All the horror and sci-fi ones anyway. So
yes.
So that's what I have as far as awards. If you don't have anything else, we can move on to keys. It's up to you.
Yep. No, I don't really have anything else in that genre.
Okay.
I mean, for that. I think, we've talked about a lot of keys. One of the ones that I have that I haven't mentioned was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. This is like, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with blood.
In Hell.
Or in Hell. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. That's great. I used to add that phrase. That's, totally what? I did not even, I don't think I even wrote that down, and that is a starkly obvious key. That's a great one.
Oh, yeah, even down to that first scene, because that's the first scene in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, too, is Poitier and her talking, and he's going, do they know about me? Mm-hmm. Well, how comfortable is this going to be if they don't? Don't you think you should have mentioned it?
Right.
And then the girlfriend trying to defend, saying, but they're not racist. No, they're not. Well, I don't know. It's kind of acting like they are.
Yeah.
And one from my genre, Stepford Wives. The way especially Georgina and the new black guy and everything else, the way they react is very Stepford Wives.
Is Stepford Wives sci-fi? I would really consider that more horror.
Really?
Well, I don't know. I'll tell you what, you take Stepford Wives and I'll take Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
There you go. I got that one too. So yes, that would be good. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's weird when we divide up our movies and pick. There are some I'm afraid we're missing because they're both so close to both, and one of them is Invasion.
Agreed.
Yeah, one of them is definitely Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So.
Well, and what might be cool when we do Invasion is to do it and compare both it and the remake.
The 78 version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the 78 version.
They both had a very strong, genre influence.
Yeah, subsequent versions pale in comparison to those two. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a few. I mean, you mentioned North by Northwest with Walter running towards him, which is, he's said that. I mean, Peele said that blatantly. Yes, that's Alfred Hitchcock right there. He said there's something very unnerving about someone running directly at the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And then he also, you had already mentioned that he cites Night of the Living Dead because of Dwayne Jones being the hero that's killed at the end. But I read, when you said that about Nightmare on Elm Street, it kind of surprised me because he says that the opening is inspired by Halloween because it's like a perfect neighborhood. And Halloween is like a perfect neighborhood where horrible things are about to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in the NPR interview I interviewed, he mentioned Halloween, but he also talked about Nightmare on Elm Street and the fact that that was his first big attraction to horror.
Okay.
Was in that suburban horror genre where the monster, i.e., Freddy, ends up almost becoming, the
hero.
Hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also something. There's a movie I've never seen. I think it's a foreign film called Lahine or Lahane. Are you familiar with that?
Don't know that one. I am not.
Well, it's got a poster of I think a black face on a white background, and it's the contrast. And apparently, he kind of stole the Get Out poster from that.
Okay.
Maybe even a tear in the eye. I can't remember. I haven't looked at it in a few days. And then there was a show called Psychoville on BBC that Daniel Kaluuya was actually in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that has like some loose connections to it as well. And then Peele also cites Rosemary's Baby, Now the Living Dead, and The Stepford Wives. He cites Silence of the Lambs as far as the close-ups of faces.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't caught that one there.
And Body Snatchers. So, I mean, he admitted, I mean, he's obviously a student of the genre. So, I mean, he's like us. He catches or uses all these things to his advantage. Because they work.
And like the only ones I would mention adding to our final list are Black Mirror, of course, because of Kaluuya. The Shining, I mentioned that just because the framing in that last basement scene is very Shining-esque, going down the hallways and the way he shoots that. And another one that I've got to go back and watch a third time, but I noticed that the box that has Rose's past boyfriends that she's brought home and Georgina was red. And I was wondering if there are other red influences in it, like in Sixth Sense. Remember
Maybe.
In Sixth Sense, every time you see red, there's a ghost. So maybe every time there's a racist remark, you see red or something. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I've got a few others that might surprise and delight you.
Yes.
The video is very similar to the Dharma Initiative on Lost. Remember those?
On Lost.
Yeah, those videotapes that they found with the history of the Dharma Initiative. Except this is, of course, whatever their cult initiative is. Also, the name Armitage might ring a bell with you. It is the name of the lead character in the Dunwich Horror by Lovecraft. Lovecraft, who was a known racist. I cannot think that's by accident.
Well, yeah, probably not.
I think Peele knew what he was doing. If he's a big a horror fan with the movies as he was with maybe reading, he would know. I would love to ask him that, though. Of course, he'd probably take credit for it anyway. Did you know that this guy, was named after a character in a horror novel written by a famous horror racist? But anyway. Yes, I did. Next question. Also, the car stalk in the beginning with the young African-American man that's abducted reminds me a little bit of movies like Duel or Christine or Jaws, where you get that suspense from the thing swimming towards you or moving towards you. Mm-hmm. And then I came up with one last one. And I'm going to have to digress after we talk about this because we made a big faux pas in the beginning of this episode. But it's a little bit like the Wicker Man in that he is going somewhere, that is supposed to be some nice weekend celebration, and he's going to be sacrificed pretty much. And I had not really thought about it till we started talking about the Wicker Man earlier and Midsummer, Samar.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I can leave it at that, but I was going to mention that both of us were getting the director wrong on Midsommar, And it's because I watched The Witch and I watched Hereditary at the same time that I made the mistake. But Midsommar is directed by Ari Aster, but he directed Hereditary, not The Witch.
Correct. Yes.
The Witch was directed by
right.
Robert Eggers, and his new movie is The Lighthouse, which I want to see as well.
Oh, yeah, the one with, well, although it has Pattinson in it,
Yeah.
I don't like him, but it might be good.
It's got Willem
Dafoe's in it.
Dafoe, yeah. But yeah, I was afraid there's going to be a million fans screaming at us at the beginning of this episode. That's not the guy that did The Witch. That's not the guy that did The Witch. So I will make a note in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we're so sorry out there. Please ignore our indiscretion there.
Right. And I did mention both of them in my blog about being horror visionaries. I just confused the movies they directed. So.
Oh my gosh, there you go again.
I know.
So, great.
So.
But that one, so we like always, we sum up by saying we both recommend this movie, definitely. Mm-hmm. It is, I think it will go down as a 21st century horror classic. I think it, just because it is so well written, and the multiple things that it says about the topics that it brings up. You know, like you said, it's a social thriller.
Yeah.
Or a societal thriller, I guess.
I also love that you mentioned, when I mentioned Dark Visionaries in that past blog I wrote, I didn't mention Peele, and he should be in there because I love that he's embracing it. I mean, he's still directing horror. He doesn't seem to care, or not care, but he doesn't seem to want to divert away from it. He's embracing it wholeheartedly because his latest movie is
definitely.
Us, and he is also working on remakes of Candyman and some other stuff down the pike that I've read about too.
Yep.
So he's deeply
Definitely.
invested in the genre. So go, Mr. Peele.
Yeah, and go, Mr. Peele.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool, Tim. Well, that will wrap us up for this week. And as always, in closing, thank all of you out there for listening to us. We really appreciate it. If you would take just the few seconds to give us a star, give us a good rating, click follow or subscribe or all that fun stuff.
Join our mailing list. You can do that at
appreciate
johnnyhasthekeys.com. Just click contact us and join our mailing list, and that'll give you an idea of what we have in store for you.
And Tim, I will end up seeing you next time.
Sounds like a plan. I will look forward to it and whatever science fiction you bring my way.
All right, man.
All right, take care.
Talk to you then.
Bye.